The phone buzzed at 2:37 a.m. Through the static, I heard my daughter whisper. Her voice cracked like it had been locked behind fear for years. "Mom, they believe him." I froze. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard. "He showed them his cut. They didn't see my bruises." Outside, the street was silent. Inside, my world wasn't. Because that's when I realized the system still listens to power, not pain. And tonight, it made the wrong choice. If this hits home, don't scroll. Stay till the end. You need to hear what she did next. The man with the bandage walked in first. You could tell by the way everyone straightened up that he was somebody. Expensive coat, wedding ring still shining, a little red stain wrapped neatly under gauze, just enough injury to look like a victim, not enough to make him look weak. I pulled up to the curb outside the 10th and Hollow precinct, headlights cutting through the fog. My pulse hadn't slowed since the call. Maya's voice still echoed in my head. They believe him, not me. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. The front desk officer didn't even look up until I said my name. "Magda Reed. I'm here for my daughter." That got a reaction, small, sharp, like a flicker of recognition. "Your daughter's being questioned," he said. "Captain Nolan will talk to you soon." Across the lobby, Oliver Crane sat on a bench, legs crossed, smiling politely at one of the officers. His shirt collar was open just enough to show the scratch on his neck. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. They'd given him water, a blanket. My daughter was probably sitting under fluorescent lights, cold and shaking. Explaining herself to a wall of disbelief. Nolan appeared a few minutes later, all polished shoes and steady eyes. "Judge Reed," he said, still using the title I'd left behind years ago. He shook my hand with both of his, the kind of handshake that says, "We're on the same team, even when we're not." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled the way I used to on the bench. "Captain." He led me down the corridor. The sound of phones ringing and low chatter followed us. "Rough night," he said. "We got 2 statements, your daughter's and her husband's. His version lines up with the physical evidence. Bruised knuckles, scratches, blood on his sleeve." "And hers?" I asked. "She's shaken up. Emotional." "Emotional," I repeated, letting the word hang. That's what they always call women, right before they stop listening. We stopped outside an interview room. Through the glass, I could see Maya hunched over the table, arms crossed. Her left cheek was swelling. A small bruise formed just under her eye. One of the officers was typing, another pretending not to watch. I turned back to Nolan. "You didn't bring a medic?" She refused. "Said she was fine. She says what she thinks you'll believe." He folded his arms. "Look, Magda, Oliver's a known figure. Runs a charity board, works with the mayor's office. His story makes sense. Hers doesn't. At least not yet. We're following protocol." There it was. The word that always meant we've stopped thinking. I looked around. Officer Sergio Park stood by the door, pretending to review papers. He'd been a rookie when I was still on the bench. Our eyes met briefly. He looked away. "How long has she been here?" I asked. "About 2 hours." "And in those 2 hours, who examined her?" Silence. Then, "No one yet. We needed to finish intake." I took a deep breath. "You finished pampering her abuser first." "That's what you mean." Nolan's jaw tightened. "We're not pampering anyone, Judge. We're handling both sides." "Handling," I said quietly. "You're handling him like a guest, and her like a case file." He didn't respond. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Do you even hear yourself? You see a man in a pressed shirt. You assume control. You see a woman trembling, you assume hysteria. That's not evidence, Captain. That's conditioning. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe irritation. This isn't personal. It's always personal, I said. Every woman who walks through that door has to fight the same invisible jury before she ever meets a real one. I looked through the glass again. Maya was talking, voice low, eyes wet. I could read her lips. He hit me first. The officer nodded, typing without looking at her. I turned away. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking. I'd sat through thousands of testimonies, hundreds of trials. But nothing prepared me for seeing my daughter become another statistic under my nose. Nolan cleared his throat. If she wants to file charges, we'll process it. But it's her word against his. Unless you can get me something stronger? Something stronger, I repeated, like a rich man's handshake. He sighed. You know how it works, Magda. We can't assume guilt based on emotion. No, I said, but you've built an entire system on assuming innocence based on confidence. He didn't answer. I could feel Sergio's eyes on me again. He looked uneasy, like a kid watching a teacher scold his boss. When I caught his gaze, he straightened up and said, "Ma'am, your daughter asked if you were coming." I nodded. "I'm here now." As Nolan walked off to take a call, I leaned against the cold wall, whispering more to myself than anyone else. If we expose this, survivors will know how to act. Sergio hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said softly, "if they see this lie unravel in daylight, maybe next time someone calls at 2:37 a.m., they won't hang up before they get help." He didn't reply, but he didn't look away this time. Down the hall, Oliver laughed, an easy, practiced sound. The kind of laugh that fills a room and convinces everyone you're harmless. I'd heard that laugh in courtrooms, boardrooms, even pulpits. It was the sound of privilege wrapping itself in charm. Maya's door opened. "You can see her now," Sergio said. I took a step forward, but before I went in, I looked back at Oliver. He caught my eye, smirked slightly, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. But I knew the shape of those words. They'll believe me. Not tonight, I thought. Not anymore. Magda stood outside the interrogation room, her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from rage she was learning how to aim. Through the glass, she watched Maya wipe her nose with the back of her hand. No one had given her a tissue. No one had asked if she needed a doctor. They were still asking if she had provoked him. Magda took a deep breath and straightened her back. Old instincts kicked in, the ones that had made lawyers nervous when she wore the black robe. She walked toward Captain Nolan's office, heels striking the floor like a gavel hitting wood. The door was half open. She didn't knock. He looked up, surprised. "Judge Reed." "Former judge," she corrected, "but I remember enough of the law to know when you're breaking it." Nolan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We're following procedure. Both parties gave statements. You haven't even taken her photos," she cut him off. "You didn't send her for a medical exam. You didn't call the on-duty nurse. That's not procedure, Captain. That's negligence disguised as convenience." He stood up, his tone suddenly formal. "Mrs. Reed, you can't come in here and—" "I just did," she said calmly. "And you'll sit back down." For a second, the room froze. Then Nolan, whether out of respect or discomfort, slowly lowered himself back into the chair. Magda took out her phone, scrolling quickly. "I have the code here, Section 3B, Subpart 2. When allegations of domestic assault arise, Both parties must receive immediate physical evaluation by a certified medical professional. That's not optional. It's your protocol. He rubbed the back of his neck. We'll get to it. You'll get to it now. Her tone wasn't loud. It was steady, the kind that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Sergio appeared in the doorway, hesitant, but listening. Officer Park, Magda said, not looking away from Nolan. Get the forensics kit from storage and call in the nurse from the night shift. Her name's Rosa Mendez. Tell her it's urgent. Sergio hesitated. Nolan started to speak, but Magda lifted a hand slightly, silencing him. Do it, she said. Or I'll call internal affairs and ask them why a woman with visible injuries sat unexamined for 3 hours while her husband got complimentary coffee. Sergio nodded and hurried out. Nolan exhaled. Exasperated. You think storming in here helps your daughter's case? I think letting bias write the report ruins it, Magda said. You've already framed her as unstable because she cried. You've already painted him as credible because he wore a suit. You're not investigating. You're confirming a story that fits your comfort zone. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. She could tell he wasn't used to being challenged. I know you're kind, Nolan, she continued softly. Men who tell themselves they're fair. But fairness isn't about being calm. It's about doing the damn work. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You don't know what we're dealing with here. Oliver Crane funds the precinct's youth program. The mayor's office. There it is, she interrupted, the invisible hand that signs the checks. You want to keep your job? Do it properly. Because if you don't, this case won't just haunt you. It'll define you. She reached for a photo frame on his desk, a charity gala picture. Nolan and Oliver, shoulder to shoulder, smiling. Magda held it up between them. How many drinks did he buy that night? She asked. How many favors did he promise? He stayed silent. Magda set the frame down carefully. I'm not here to play moral chess with you, Captain. I'm here to remind you that the law doesn't bend for money. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a low, deliberate whisper. You will reopen this case. You will file a medical request for my daughter. And you will assign a separate officer to re-interview her with a witness present. That's not a suggestion. That's a correction. Nolan looked at her for a long moment, something flickering behind his eyes. Shame, maybe. Or the faint recognition that he was standing in front of a woman who once was the law. He finally spoke. You think this will fix it? No, Magda said quietly, but it'll stop it from getting worse. Sergio came back, breathless. Rosa's on her way. She said 10 minutes. Good, Magda said, nodding. When she's done, have her document everything. Old bruises, new marks, all of it. Chain of custody goes straight to evidence lockup, and make sure the timestamp's visible. Sergio scribbled notes. Yes, ma'am. When he left again, Nolan muttered, You haven't changed. I hope not, Magda said. The world's still messy. Someone has to keep the corners clean. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You really think people care about chain of custody and timestamps? It's politics now. The story's already written. Magda looked out the window toward the holding cells. Then we'll write another one. She turned back, her tone softer but sharper somehow. I sat on that bench for 20 years, Captain. I watched good men use protocol as armor for cowardice, and I swore when I retired I'd never let that happen in my house. Now, it's happening in yours. Nolan stared at her. For a second, he looked tired, like a man realizing the ground he stood on was thinner than he thought. Magda straightened her coat, heading for the door. "You can either help me or get out of my way." He called after her, "You don't scare me, Judge." She paused, hand on the doorframe, and glanced back. "I'm not trying to. I'm trying to wake you up." In the hallway, she exhaled slowly, the weight of the night pressing on her shoulders. For the first time since the call, she allowed herself a single thought of relief. At least now, someone's moving. As she passed the bulletin board near the exit, she saw Oliver's name on a printed charity flyer, the Crane Foundation for Family Wellness. Magda ripped it down without breaking stride. Behind her, Captain Nolan's door slammed, and his voice echoed down the hall. "Get me Officer Park. We're reopening the file." Magda didn't smile. She just whispered to herself, "That's a start." Rosa arrived 10 minutes later, her scrubs wrinkled, hair tied back in a messy bun. She didn't ask questions, just glanced at Magda, then at Maya, sitting silently on the metal chair, her hands trembling in her lap. "Let's move her to the waiting room," Rosa said softly. "There's better light there." The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and cheap coffee. Maya flinched as Rosa gently lifted her sleeve. A dark bruise spread down her forearm like an oil spill. Then, higher up, another one, older, faded to yellow. Rosa looked at Magda. No words exchanged. They both understood what that meant. This didn't happen once. Rosa adjusted the lamp, her voice calm but firm. "Some of these are at least 2 weeks old, some fresh. She needs a full examination. X-rays, neck and rib scans, maybe a CT if she's been dizzy." Maya's lips parted. He said, "I fell." Magda knelt beside her daughter. "You don't fall in the same place twice?" Maya blinked back, tears. "Mom, they won't believe me." "Then we'll make them," Magda said, quietly. Rosa hesitated, then handed Magda a clipboard. "They'll want this filled out before I can take her to medical. Standard form. But if Nolan finds out I logged it under a priority case, he'll ask questions." Magda took the pen. "Let him." The door opened behind them. Nolan stood there, arms crossed. "What's going on here?" Rosa straightened up, unflinching. "I'm documenting injuries, following your own protocol." Without clearance? His tone sharpened. Magda rose slowly. "You already gave clearance when you reopened the case, Captain. Remember?" He stared at her, jaw tight. "You're twisting my words." "I'm repeating them," she said. He stepped closer, voice low. "You're making a scene, Judge." Magda met his eyes. "No, Captain. You made the scene. I'm just turning on the lights." For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the click of Rosa's camera. Each flash cut through the silence like lightning, freezing small pieces of truth. The bruise near Maya's temple, the marks along her wrist, the discoloration on her collarbone. Nolan rubbed his temples. "You think this proves something?" She could have hurt herself. "We've seen that before." Magda's voice trembled, but not from weakness. "You've chosen to see that before, because it's easier than facing the pattern right in front of you." Rosa looked up. "There's a mark on her neck," she said softly. "Pressure bruising." He grabbed her. "Don't speculate," Nolan snapped. "It's not speculation," Rosa said, turning the lamp. "It's anatomy." The tension in the room thickened. Magda felt her pulse in her throat. "Tell me, Captain," she said, stepping forward. "If this were your daughter, would you call that speculation too?" He didn't answer. Rosa kept working. Photos, measurements, gentle instructions for Maya to lift her chin, turn her arm. Every flash of the camera revealed another piece of history. A private timeline carved into skin. Old bruises. New lies. Maya whispered, almost to herself. I stopped taking pictures because he said it made me crazy, like I was obsessed with proof. Magda took her hand. He said that because proof scares him. Rosa placed the camera down. We're done. I'll file these directly to the medical database. He can't delete them from there. Nolan exhaled, rubbing his jaw. You're overstepping, Rosa. With respect, sir, Rosa said evenly. So are you. For a long moment, the captain just stared at her, the weight of years of routine pressing against the truth he couldn't unsee. Fine, he muttered. But if this blows up, it's on you. It already blew up, Magda said. You just weren't listening when it happened. He turned to leave, but she stopped him. You know the Alvarez case? 5 years ago, woman came in with bruises like these. You said it was an accident. She was found dead 2 weeks later. Nolan froze. Magda's voice softened. This is your second chance to not make that mistake again. He left without a word. Rosa packed up her equipment. He'll calm down later, she said. They always do. Once the paperwork looks heavier than their pride. Magda managed a small smile. You're braver than most people here. Rosa shrugged. You stay in this job long enough. You learn what fear looks like and what it hides. Maya leaned back, exhausted. Her breathing steadied for the first time that night. Magda brushed a strand of hair from her face. You did good, sweetheart, she whispered. You told the truth, and we caught it before it disappeared. As Rosa left to file the report, Magda looked around the dim waiting room. The vending machine hummed, fluorescent lights buzzed, and somewhere down the hall, Nolan's voice barked orders that sounded less certain now. For the first time, Magda felt a shift. Not victory, not yet, but movement. The system had blinked. She whispered, mostly to herself, these bruises, they're not just evidence. They're chapters of everything she tried to survive in silence. Outside, rain hit the windows in slow, deliberate drops. Maya stared at them, dazed. Mom, she said quietly, what happens now? Magda squeezed her hand. Now? She glanced toward the hallway where Rosa disappeared. Now we make them see what they've been trying not to. And somewhere deep down, beneath the anger and fear, Magda felt a faint spark of something she hadn't in hours. Resolve. Because evidence didn't just prove pain, it spoke when the world refused to listen. The next morning, the air in the precinct was different, thicker, heavier. Oliver was back, sitting across from Captain Nolan, perfectly pressed shirt, tie knotted just right. He looked like he'd come to negotiate a property deal, not face an assault investigation. His smile was calm, rehearsed. Magda could see the performance from the doorway. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. We're not done, she said. Nolan's voice was dry. Judge Reed, we've collected statements, photos, medical reports. And none of it changes the fact that you haven't questioned him since last night. Oliver leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs, his bandaged hand resting casually on his knee. I told the officers everything. I was defending myself. Maya was emotional. You know how that goes. Magda met his eyes. You're right. I do know how that goes. I've seen men like you convince rooms like this one that bruises tell lies. Nolan shifted uncomfortably. Let's not turn this into a personal. I'm making it procedural, Magda cut in. And speaking of procedure, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small silver flash drive. setting it gently on the table between them. You might want to call your tech unit, Captain, because this right here, this contains her voice. Oliver's smirk faltered for the first time. What is that? It's what she recorded, Magda said. Every time you forgot she had a phone in her pocket, every time you called her crazy, every time you raised your hand, every threat you made after midnight. She kept it. Nolan frowned. You're saying she recorded him? That's illegal without consent. In this state? Magda interrupted. Not when it's evidence of abuse. Not when it's survival. Oliver laughed, short and sharp. You're bluffing. Magda tilted her head. Am I? For a moment, no one moved. The hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence. Then Magda leaned forward, voice quiet but razor-edged. You built your safety on people's doubt. You thought if you smiled the right way, wore the right suit, nobody would ever look past the polish. But here's the thing. Truth doesn't need polish. It just needs a witness. Oliver's jaw tightened. You don't have anything. Then you have nothing to worry about, Magda said calmly. He stared at the flash drive, his breathing suddenly shallow. Nolan's gaze flicked between them, unsure where to stand. If this recording exists, he said slowly, it would have to be authenticated. Chain of custody, verification. Which I've already started, Magda replied. Officer Park has logged it as preliminary evidence. Forensics will get it next, unless you'd like to stop them. Nolan swallowed. I didn't approve. You did when you reopened the case, Magda said. Remember? I made sure you set it on record. The room felt smaller now. Oliver's confidence cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But enough. You think this little theater act will scare me? He said, forcing a laugh. You're bluffing. Magda smiled. I've spent my life around men who said that right before the verdict. He leaned forward, voice low, venomous. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you, she said softly. You've spent so long controlling the story. You forgot what happens when someone else starts writing it. Rosa entered just then, holding a sealed envelope. Medical report, she said, placing it in front of Nolan. Documented bruising from 3 separate time frames, photos attached, time-stamped. Nolan looked down, flipping through the pages. Color drained from his face. Magda kept her eyes on Oliver. You see? We don't bluff, Mr. Crane. We build. For the first time, his composure slipped. He stood, pacing, laughing under his breath. This is ridiculous. You think a few photos and a made-up recording will undo my reputation? Magda's tone stayed steady. No, your actions will. He turned to Nolan, snapping. Are you really entertaining this? You know me. You've seen the work I do for this city. Nolan didn't look up. He just said quietly, Sit down, Oliver. That sentence hit like a gavel. Oliver froze. Magda picked up the flash drive, twirling it between her fingers. You built your image like a fortress, she said. But you left the door unlocked every time you thought she was too scared to speak. Now, every word you said is about to walk out of that door and into evidence. He sneered. You're bluffing, he repeated. But there was less certainty this time. Maybe, Magda said, pocketing the drive. But here's the problem with a bluff. It only works when the other person can't afford to call it. She stood. You, on the other hand, can't afford not to. Oliver's voice cracked. What do you want? Truth, Magda said simply, and a written statement before the clock strikes noon. He stared at her, the weight of his own lies pressing down. For the first time, he didn't look powerful, just cornered. Nolan cleared his throat, muttering something about protocol, but Magda barely heard him. Her focus was on Oliver, on the silence that came after the threat. Because that silence told her everything. He wasn't afraid of being accused. He was afraid of being heard. And as she turned to leave, she whispered just loud enough for him to catch it. The voice that proves your lies is louder than you think. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on. The flash drive sat in the middle of the table, a tiny silver thing with the weight of a bomb. Oliver's eyes were glued to it, jaw tight, pulse visible in his temple. Magda could see the fear underneath his arrogance, the twitch in his hand, the shallow breath he tried to hide. Captain Nolan cleared his throat. Let's just hear what's on it. Oliver's voice cracked. That's inadmissible. There is no proof it's authentic. Magda didn't look at him. You said that before too, remember? Nobody will believe her. Let's find out. She nodded at Officer Park, who plugged the flash drive into the small gray laptop. The loading bar crawled, the seconds stretching like hours. A faint hiss filled the speakers, then static. And then a voice. Oliver's voice. It wasn't loud at first, calm, almost tender. You don't get to talk to me like that, Maya. Then a hard thud, a muffled sob. You hear me? The voice grew sharper. If you tell anyone what happens in this house, I will ruin you. I will make sure no one believes a word you say. A second thud, a faint crash, the sound of glass breaking. Maya's breath hitched. Even now, just hearing it again, her shoulders shook. Magda reached for her hand under the table, holding tight. Rosa stood frozen by the door, one hand over her mouth. In that small, airless room, no one moved. Nolan's pen fell from his hand and clattered on the floor. Jesus Christ, he muttered. The audio continued, short, fragmented, filled with silences that said more than words ever could. A chair scraping, a door slamming. Then Maya's voice, small, shaking. Please, please don't. Then nothing. Just a quiet, so raw it felt alive. Park stopped the recording. For a moment, all you could hear was the hum of the air conditioner. Oliver stood, face pale, voice trembling with fury. That could be anyone. That's not... Sit down, Nolan said, his voice suddenly different. Flat, hard. Oliver blinked. What? I said. Sit down. For the first time, Magda saw the man's authority turn, not toward Oliver, against him. Nolan rubbed his forehead, eyes still fixed on the screen. I've been on the force 20 years. I've heard confessions, threats, the worst kind of things. But that, he exhaled, that's not just abuse. That's terror. Magda leaned back in her chair, her voice quiet but steady. That's what you missed while you were shaking his hand. Oliver tried to laugh, but it came out uneven. You're making a spectacle out of nothing. You don't understand? Oh, I understand, Magda said. You thought her silence was safety. You thought control meant love. But the thing about control is, once it's recorded, it becomes evidence. He slammed his fist on the table, shouting, She wanted this! She! Enough! Nolan's voice cut through like a whip. You're done talking. Rosa moved closer to Maya, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. Maya's eyes were wide, glassy, but she didn't look away from Oliver. Not this time. Magda turned to Nolan. You'll file this immediately. Chain of custody, timestamp, the works. I want a copy secured in the case log, another in forensics. And Captain? He looked up. We're not stopping here, she said. This won't end with a report. We'll expose him not only to the court, but to the city. Oliver laughed bitterly. You think anyone cares? I'm on the board of 3 charities. I sit next to the mayor every other month. Magda leaned in, her tone soft, deliberate. That's exactly why they'll care. Nolan nodded slowly, as if waking up from a long fog. Officer Park, call Ada Rao. Tell her we've got an audio file. Domestic violence, high-profile subject, immediate review. Park didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Oliver's voice broke again. You can't do this. You have no idea what you're starting. Magda stood. No, Oliver, you started this. We're just finishing it. He reached for the laptop, but Nolan blocked him. 2 other officers entered the room, their presence quiet but solid, the kind of silence that fills space with authority. As they escorted Oliver out, the hallway echoed with his protests, the desperate kind, half denial, half disbelief that his words were finally louder than his charm. When the door closed, Magda let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Rosa turned to her. That recording, it'll spread, won't it? Magda nodded. It should. The truth should echo. People need to hear what control really sounds like. Maya spoke softly. Mom? Magda looked at her. He always said no one would believe me. Magda's voice cracked just slightly. And now, they will. The clock on the wall ticked, each second heavier than the last. Outside, reporters' voices began to rise, word traveling faster than she expected. Magda stared at the door where Oliver had been led away. This is just the first crack, she murmured. The rest of the mask will fall. Maya squeezed her mother's hand. For the first time, she didn't feel small. In that moment, the recording stopped being just evidence. It became something else. A voice reclaimed. A warning to anyone who ever thought silence could be buried. And as Magda looked toward the window, sunlight breaking faintly through the clouds, she whispered to herself, let them hear it. All of them. The search started at dawn. The city was still half asleep when Magda stepped out of the car in front of Oliver Crane's high-rise condo. Glass walls, spotless marble, ocean view. From the outside, it looked like success. Inside, it felt like a stage built to hide something rotten. Rosa met her at the elevator with a warrant in hand. You sure he kept things here? She asked. Magda nodded. Men like him don't destroy evidence. They collect it, like trophies. The elevator doors opened to a silence that didn't feel peaceful. Just watched. Oliver's place was too clean, too arranged. Every picture frame was perfectly leveled, every book spine aligned, the kind of order that screamed control. ADA Priya Rao arrived moments later with 2 tech investigators. We'll sweep every device, she said, slipping on gloves. Drives, phones, cameras, even that smart speaker. They started methodically, drawers, cabinets, closets. One officer found a folder labeled Client Relations, full of unsigned NDAs. Rosa found a second phone behind a stack of files, the battery removed, but not wiped. Then came the laptop. Password protected. Naturally. Priya handed it to the digital forensics tech. You've got 10 minutes before he calls his lawyer and claims privilege. The tech smiled faintly. I only need 5. While they worked, Magda walked toward the living room window. The city glowed below her, the same skyline Oliver used to boast about over charity dinners. A view like that makes people forget who's behind the glass, she said softly. Rosa looked up. Until they see the reflection, a soft beep. The laptop unlocked, the first folder. Media archive. Inside, hundreds of files. Audio clips, screenshots, photos. Some labeled with dates, some just with names. Priya frowned. Why would he keep all this? Magda's voice was steady. Because leverage is his currency, this is his insurance policy. They clicked one of the video files. The screen lit up with a recording from a dinner party. Oliver smiling, surrounded by people who now sat on non-profit boards and magazine covers. But when the camera panned slightly, Maya appeared in the corner, pouring wine. The audio caught his voice saying quietly, "Smile, sweetheart. You're part of the brand." Rosa muttered, "Jesus." Magda's hands tightened into fists. He used her life as content. They kept going. Another folder, encrypted documents labeled crisis scripts. The text inside looked like PR statements, pre-written apologies, press releases, even fake testimonials. Priya's face went pale. He planned for exposure before it even happened. File farming, Magda said. He collected dirt on everyone else so if anyone spoke up, he could bury them first. The tech called from across the room. "You'll want to see this." On a separate hard drive, dozens of screenshots appeared, private emails, voice memos, text threads. They weren't just Maya's. There were other names: Chloe M., Danielle R., Aaron T. Magda exhaled slowly. He didn't stop with her. Rosa crossed her arms, her voice low. So this was his empire, blackmail and control dressed up as philanthropy. Magda looked around the condo again. Everything shiny, expensive, curated. "A mansion of mirrors," she murmured. He built it to make sure everyone saw what he wanted them to see, including himself. Priya nodded toward the digital tech. "Back up every file. Copy the metadata. Nothing leaves this room without documentation." The tech hesitated. There's more." He had an encrypted drive hidden inside a folder labeled Taxes. "I can open it, but you should probably see what's in it first." When the file opened, a list of transactions appeared. Payments to private investigators, transfers to shell accounts, and beneath it, a spreadsheet titled Retainer Agreements. It listed names, amounts, and one column marked Containment Success. Rosa whispered, "He paid people to silence victims." Magda's voice hardened. "Then let's make sure every one of those payments becomes a headline." Priya leaned over her shoulder, reading line by line. "These aren't just payouts, they're signatures, proof of coordination." He didn't just act alone, he ran a network. Magda closed the laptop slowly, and that network's about to collapse. They spent hours cataloging every file, every photo. The sunlight shifted through the glass walls, turning gold, then gray again. When they finally packed up, the once perfect condo looked stripped of its illusion. Just furniture and dust. No more secrets left to shine. Rosa locked the evidence bag and handed it to Priya. "I never thought justice would look like hard drives and spreadsheets." Magda gave a faint smile. "Justice always starts with the things people think are boring. Paper trails, phone logs, timestamps. That's how truth stays alive." Before leaving, Magda paused at the doorway, looking back at the room one last time. "He built his life like a stage," she said, quietly. "But every actor forgets the mic is still on when the curtain falls." Rosa tilted her head. "You think he knows yet?" "Oh, he will," Magda said. "When he realizes the story he tried to control is now the one writing him out." They stepped into the elevator, the hum of the city growing louder beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, not frantic, but resolute, like a city finally starting to listen. And for the first time since that night, Magda felt the anger shift into something else. Not peace, not yet, but momentum. The truth was finally moving. At first, it was just Maya's story. One woman's voice against the weight of power. But Once the files from Oliver's condo went public, the silence started to break. Not slowly, but like glass shattering. The first call came from Chloe. She worked at a marketing firm downtown. Quiet voice, polite smile. She told ADA Priya Rao she recognized the pattern in Oliver's emails. The tone, the wording, the way he turned guilt into gratitude. He did the same thing to me, she whispered. Different city, same lines. Then Danielle reached out, a teacher from Vermont. She'd left her husband 3 years ago, but still had folders of joint finances Oliver had helped manage. Except the money never went where it should have. He said he was protecting me from myself, she said, tears trembling in her throat. Rosa sat beside her, holding her hand. You're not crazy, she told her. He just made you feel like you were. By the end of the week, there were 5 women, then 9. Some didn't even know each other's names, but all their stories echoed. Manipulation, disguised as care. Threats disguised as jokes. Paperwork that turned into traps. Priya stood before the boardroom whiteboard, drawing lines between names, dates, and payments. This isn't a single case, she said. It's a system, a pattern of coercion. Magda leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her voice low. He built a network to isolate them, but now that same network is connecting them back. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Chloe spoke up. I thought I was alone, she said softly. All this time, I thought I was the only one he picked apart. Maya turned to her, voice steady but gentle. That's what he wanted you to think. That's how he wins, Rosa added. But look at us now. We're sitting in the same room. He can't erase that. Priya glanced down at her notes. We'll build the case with pattern evidence, similar methods, timelines, threats. If the jury sees repetition, they'll see intent. Magda nodded. And if the public sees it, they'll see themselves. They'll realize how often this happens behind the smiling photos. Chloe hesitated, then said, Do you really think people will care? It's all headlines for a week, then silence again. Magda's eyes met hers. Then, we don't give them silence. We give them a map. That night, in the ADA's office, they gathered around a screen. Priya pulled up the call log. Dozens of messages, women from different states, some anonymous, some trembling, some furious. Each one telling a version of the same story. A man who knew how to stay just one step ahead of accountability. Magda's voice broke the stillness. This isn't a story, she said. It's a map of real calls we got last month, Rosa whispered. How many maps like this exist that no one ever sees? Priya stared at the list. Too many, but this one, we make visible. They started recording statements, one after another. Chloe's calm tone when she described the emails. Danielle's shaking hands as she held up the bank receipts. Rosa's unwavering gaze as she recounted her night at the hospital. Maya's quiet strength as she sat beside them. No longer just a victim, a witness among witnesses. By midnight, the office lights burned through the windows, and the sound of typing filled the air like a heartbeat. Every file, every name, every timestamp layered into something bigger than one case. At one point, Maya looked around the room, at the faces of women she'd never met before that day, and she smiled through tears. He used to say I'd never find anyone who believed me, she said. Guess he was wrong. Magda reached over, resting a hand on her shoulder. He built his power on isolation. You just dismantled it. Priya closed her laptop and leaned back. Tomorrow, we file the expanded motion. Multiple victims, pattern of predation, coordinated evidence. Once that hits, the narrative changes. Rosa exhaled, almost laughing from exhaustion. It's crazy. We started this week thinking we were chasing one man. Turns out we're unmasking a whole way of doing business. Exactly, Magda said. This isn't just about Oliver. It's about the idea that people like him exist because silence keeps them fed. Chloe nodded. Then maybe breaking that silence is how we starve the system. The clock on the wall ticked past 1 in the morning. No one moved to leave. The air was tired but alive, the kind of fatigue that comes after something true begins. Outside, the city lights flickered, unaware that, in one quiet office, a small group of women was rewriting how stories like theirs get told. Magda looked at each of them, Maya, Rosa, Chloe, Danielle, Priya, and said softly, "You're not witnesses anymore. You're the evidence." And in that sentence, the room shifted. Not with fear, not with anger, but with unity. Because when voices overlap, even whispers sound like thunder. The courthouse smelled of old wood and burnt coffee, the kind of place where truth always seemed to come out slower than lies. Magda sat at the long conference table, surrounded by boxes of files stacked like walls. Priya Rao leaned over one of them, highlighting sections, whispering to herself. Chain of custody, timeline, consistency. If we lose one of these, the defense will shred us. Aisha, the forensic analyst, walked in holding a sealed envelope. We got confirmation from the lab. The fingerprints on the voice recorder match Oliver's. Magda took a deep breath. Good. Now it's not just her word. Priya didn't look up. His attorney, Victor Ames, will still argue manipulation. He'll claim Maya planted the device. Magda's voice was calm but sharp. Then we show procedure, time-stamped entries, evidence chain, verified metadata. He can spin stories, but he can't rewrite data. Rosa entered next, carrying a coffee tray and a quiet sense of resolve. They've been camped outside the courthouse since dawn, she said. Reporters, cameras, everyone waiting to see if the system works for once. Magda looked at the glass doors beyond, then let them see how it's supposed to work. The hearing began at noon. Victor Ames was already there, expensive suit, practice smirk. Mrs. Crane, he said, turning to Maya as if greeting an old friend, we meet again. I assume you're enjoying your 15 minutes. Maya said nothing, her fingers tightening around the edge of the witness table. Magda squeezed her shoulder gently. Don't let him set the tone, she whispered. When Priya stood to speak, her voice carried the precision of someone who knew both the law and the cost of it. We present multiple corroborating pieces of evidence, she said. Audio recordings, physical injuries confirmed by medical professionals, financial records, and corroboration from other victims. Victor rose immediately. Objection. Character evidence. Irrelevant, prejudicial, and speculative. Priya shot back. Pattern evidence. Directly relevant to motive, control, and credibility. The law recognizes repetition as intent. The judge looked over his glasses. Sustained in part. You may proceed carefully. Magda watched every word like a chess player reading the board. Victor was smart. Too smart to fight where he couldn't win. Instead, he redirected. Let's talk about the supposed recordings. Who handled them? Who transferred them? Who can say they weren't edited? Magda stood. Before Priya could answer, her voice carried quiet authority. I can. Every file was logged under federal chain of custody. Each copy verified by an independent digital analyst. If Mr. Ames wants to argue tampering, he'll need evidence, not insinuation. The room stilled. Even Victor hesitated before forcing a smile. Well, you certainly haven't lost your courtroom touch, Judge Halberg. Magda didn't flinch. Retired, not irrelevant. A few jurors smiled faintly. The tide shifted. Hours passed. Testimony, exhibits, rebuttals. The rhythm of law was slow, methodical, almost cruel in its patience. But underneath it, something was building. Structure, order, consequence. During a short recess, Maya stood by the window, staring at the city. "It feels strange," she murmured, "to have my life laid out like evidence." Magda joined her. "Evidence is just truth with timestamps. You're not on trial. He is." Back inside, Priya called their digital forensics expert. He explained file trails, encryption, and the impossibility of fabricating months of metadata. The jury leaned in. It wasn't emotional, but it was irrefutable. Victor shifted tactics. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is about perception. My client is a respected businessman, a community donor. You're being asked to believe that behind his success lies a monster. Doesn't that sound convenient?" Priya's reply was cold precision. "Monsters don't hide under beds anymore, Mr. Ames. They hide behind foundations and polished statements." Magda whispered to Rosa, "He's losing them." Rosa smiled slightly. About time. When Priya rested her case, the judge called for closing arguments the following morning. The team gathered in the empty courtroom that evening, exhaustion etched on their faces. Aisha spoke first. "You think it's enough?" Magda nodded. "It has to be. But tomorrow isn't just about the law. It's about the story people believe." She looked around the room, the flickering lights casting long shadows. "If we want accountability, we can't stop at the verdict. We prepare the truth for daylight. Press releases, verified documents, public transparency. He controlled the narrative for years. Now, it's our turn." Rosa hesitated. "You think the public will listen?" Magda turned to her. "They will if we make it simple and human. Not statistics. Faces. Voices." Then she spoke softly, almost like a message to the viewer. "If you witness abuse, record time and date, keep copies, call the hotline. Don't wait for someone to tell you it's serious, because by the time the law catches up, the silence has already done half the damage." For a moment, no one said anything. Then Priya nodded slowly. "That's what this is, isn't it? Not just one case, a playbook for the next one." Magda smiled faintly. "Exactly. The law is our instrument, but truth is the rhythm that keeps it alive." Outside, night settled over the courthouse. Inside, stacks of evidence stood like monuments, proof that stories, when told in full, could bend even the slow weight of justice towards something that finally looked like light. The courtroom was already packed when they walked in. Reporters, law students, faces that looked more curious than compassionate. Cameras clicked like insects. Maya sat beside Priya at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded so tight her knuckles were white. Magda sat right behind her, steady, silent, the kind of presence that felt like armor. Victor Ames, Oliver's attorney, stood tall at the other side, his suit too sharp, his tone too smooth. "Your Honor," he began, "my client is not a threat. He has deep community ties, a clean record, and a family business that employs dozens of people. This is a misunderstanding inflated by media and emotion." Priya rose calmly. "Your Honor, my office has presented overwhelming evidence of coercion, intimidation, and a pattern of threats. We're not here to debate his resume. We're here to prevent further harm. The judge glanced at both sides. Proceed. Priya turned to the screen. Exhibit B, she said. A photo appeared. Oliver's. Text messages, laced with control and threats cloaked as apologies. This is what misunderstanding looks like, she said, quietly. Victor objected, of course, out of context. She baited him. Magda leaned forward, whispering under her breath, He's losing ground. Watch his eyes. Oliver did look uneasy, tapping his foot, jaw tight. For the first time, the public could see it. The crack behind the charm. Priya continued, stacking her logic like bricks. Your Honor, we have multiple corroborating victims, audio evidence authenticated by forensic experts, financial transactions designed to buy silence. We're not dealing with impulse. We're dealing with calculation. The courtroom went still. Even Victor's smirk faded. He tried one last angle. If my client were truly dangerous, why wait this long to speak up? Why now? Maya looked up, her voice clear though trembling slightly. Because for years, I thought no one would believe me. And now, they do. That sentence cut through the room like a blade. Even the judge paused before answering. Priya took the moment. Your Honor, we request that bail be denied. The defendant has the resources, the reach, and the intent to intimidate witnesses. Safety isn't theoretical here. It's a daily calculation for these women. Victor shot back. He's not a flight risk. This is character assassination. Magda stood, her voice low but commanding. No, Mr. Ames. This is accountability. For once, you could hear someone in the gallery whisper, That's her, the retired judge. The judge leaned forward, hands folded. I've reviewed the exhibits and the motion, the recordings, the medical reports. The testimony all show a consistent pattern of manipulation and abuse. This court cannot ignore risk simply because the defendant wears a suit. He paused, looked straight at Oliver. Bail denied. The words hung in the air. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the murmurs began. Reporters scribbling, flashes popping, a ripple of disbelief spreading through the room. Oliver clenched his fists, his mask cracking. This is absurd, he hissed, but the officers were already stepping closer. Maya exhaled a long, shaking breath. Her whole body seemed to loosen, as if she'd been holding her life in for years. Magda placed a hand on her shoulder. You're safe tonight, she whispered. At least tonight. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Microphones, questions, chaos. Priya spoke calmly to the cameras. This isn't victory, she said. It's safety, temporary, but necessary. We want survivors watching this to know. The law can protect you, but only if we hear you first. Rosa, standing nearby, added quietly, If you're in danger, don't wait. Record the time. Save the messages. Call the hotline. Silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps them free. Magda looked out at the crowd, half believers, half skeptics, and said softly, Justice doesn't shout. It starts with someone whispering the truth out loud. Reporters kept asking about the trial ahead, about whether Oliver's empire would collapse, about the women testifying next. But Maya wasn't listening anymore. She stood beside the courthouse steps, feeling the cold wind on her face. For the first time, the air didn't feel like fear. It felt like space. She looked back at Magda. It's not over, is it? Magda shook her head. No, but for the first time, it's not all on you. As the courthouse doors closed behind them, the noise faded. replaced by the steady hum of a city finally paying attention. That night, the headlines spread across every feed. Judge denies bail in high-profile coercion case. But what mattered most wasn't the article. It was the hundreds of comments from strangers, women saying, "I see her. I believe her." And in the quiet of Magda's kitchen later that night, when the lights were low and the weight of the day began to lift, she said what she'd been holding in since the start. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just breathes. The courtroom was silent, that heavy kind of silence where you can hear every breath, every nervous shuffle of paper. Maya sat at the witness stand, palms pressed together to stop the shaking. Across the aisle, Oliver watched her like she was a stranger he was trying to recognize. He still had that same calm mask, but something in his eyes was fraying. Priya stepped forward. "Miss Crane, can you tell the court what your mornings were like during that time?" Maya swallowed, her voice soft but steady. "He'd check my phone before I got out of bed. He said it was just to make sure I wasn't stressed. But really, it was control, quiet, disguised as care." Priya nodded gently. "And when did it stop feeling like care?" Maya looked down, her voice trembling. "The night he broke the glass, said if I told anyone, he'd ruin me. That's when I knew he wasn't protecting me. He was protecting the story he told about himself." The room stayed silent. Even Victor Ames didn't interrupt. He only adjusted his tie, waiting for his chance to twist the words. Priya clicked a remote. The screen flickered to life. A short clip, the same audio they'd authenticated weeks ago. A man's voice, calm 1 second, venom the next. "You think anyone's gonna believe you? Look at me. Look at you," gasps echoed from the gallery. Oliver's face drained of color. The judge raised a hand. "The recording will stand." Priya turned back to Maya. "Did you ever respond to that?" Maya shook her head. "No. I just stopped speaking at all. When you're told enough times your voice doesn't matter, you start to believe it." Victor stood then, pacing slowly. "Miss Crane, you're clearly emotional. But isn't it true that you stayed in that house willingly? That you benefited from his income, his connections, his—" Maya cut in, her voice sharper now, "from his fear. That's what I lived off. The fear of what would happen if I left." The room erupted in murmurs. Even the stenographer paused for a second. Victor tried again, softer this time. "You're angry, I understand. But maybe, in moments of frustration, you said things too." Threatened him. Maya met his gaze, her expression calm. "The only threat I ever made was to survive." Priya leaned forward, her tone steady but fierce. "Your Honor, the defense is attempting to redirect the focus to emotion because the evidence speaks for itself. The financial coercion, the hospital reports, the corroborating testimonies. Abuse doesn't always leave broken bones. Sometimes it leaves timelines." Magda, sitting in the front row, whispered under her breath, "That's my girl." The judge nodded for Priya to continue. "Miss Crane," she said softly, "if you could tell the court one thing about that version of you, the one who stayed, what would it be?" Maya took a deep breath. She wasn't weak. She was waiting for proof that someone would finally listen. The jury was utterly still. Priya turned to them, and that's the core of this case: listening. Every woman who came forward told a story that fit the same pattern, the same control, the same tactics, the same words. That's not coincidence. That's design. Victor rose for his closing attempt, his confidence now forced. "Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that loves villains. It's easy to turn a successful man into one. These are personal disputes, exaggerated by emotion and regret. But his voice cracked on the word successful. He could feel the weight shifting in the room. Priya spoke last, her words quiet but cutting. Success doesn't erase cruelty. Power doesn't cancel harm. If it did, none of us would be here. She placed her notes down and looked toward Maya. Survivors don't seek revenge, they seek daylight. Maya's eyes welled up, but she didn't look away. I don't want revenge, she said softly, more to herself than anyone. I just want mornings without fear. That line hit like a heartbeat, real, raw, final. The judge called a brief recess, and Maya stepped down from the stand. Magda met her halfway, holding her by the shoulders. You did it, she whispered. Maya shook her head. Not yet. No, Magda said gently, but you stood, and that's how it starts. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned gray, not heavy, just quiet. People stood around talking in low voices, strangers holding signs that read, Believe her, and truth is evidence, too. Inside, Victor sat alone at his table, flipping through papers he no longer believed could save his client. And across the aisle, Maya sat beside Priya, her hands no longer shaking. For the first time, she wasn't the woman on the recording. She was the voice that outlasted it. The courtroom felt heavier than usual that morning, the kind of air that knows something irreversible is about to happen. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable, carrying weeks of testimony, tears and evidence inside those tiny slips of paper. Maya sat still, her hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the judge's bench. Magda was right beside her, not touching, just near enough that Maya could feel her steadiness. The judge cleared his throat. In the case of the state versus Oliver Crane, on the charges of coercive control, assault, and obstruction, he paused, letting the silence stretch. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. A sound rippled through the room, not loud, but deep. Like everyone had been holding their breath for months and just remembered how to exhale. Oliver didn't move at first. His jaw tightened, the faint smirk he'd worn all trial finally cracking. That's not possible, he whispered. You people, you don't understand. Priya stood still, papers folded at her side, her eyes sharp and calm. No, Mr. Crane, she said quietly. For once, they do. The bailiff approached. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed across the courtroom. Oliver turned slightly, searching for someone. Maybe sympathy, maybe control. But all he found were cameras and faces that didn't look away this time. The judge continued, voice steady. Given the weight of the evidence and the pattern of abuse, this court sentences the defendant to 18 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole before 12. Gasps, whispers, a few muffled sobs, some from the gallery, some from the women who had testified and now sat behind Maya, their hands over their mouths. Oliver finally looked at Maya. His lips parted as if to speak, but she didn't flinch, didn't answer. She just met his stare and said, quietly but clear enough for him to hear, You don't own the silence anymore. That broke something in him. He dropped his gaze, eyes hollow, shoulders folding in on themselves. The guards led him out, his footsteps slow, echoing down the marble hallway until they faded completely. Then the room erupted, reporters calling questions, cameras flashing, people crying, hugging, whispering. But in the middle of it all, Maya just sat there, still, breathing. Magda placed a hand on her back. It's over, she whispered. Maya shook her head softly. No. It's just the part where he stops. I still have to start. Magda smiled through tears. Then, start by standing. Maya rose slowly, turning toward the others, Chloe, Rosa, Danielle, the women who had risked everything to speak. They were crying too, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was release. It was finally being heard. Outside, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters. Priya faced them, her words calm but powerful. Today is not about one man's punishment, it's about a system that finally chose to listen. Justice doesn't erase what happened, it protects what's left, Rosa added quietly. And for every woman still afraid to come forward, this is proof that truth can stand. The headlines would come within hours. Businessman sentenced in historic coercion case. Survivors find justice after years of silence. But none of that mattered as much as the moment between Maya and her mother, in the quiet just before they left. Magda looked at her daughter, eyes soft, voice trembling slightly. You did it. Maya smiled, tears spilling freely now. We did. They stepped outside into the cold air. Cameras flashed, but Maya didn't hide her face this time. She didn't shrink. She walked down those courthouse steps with her shoulders back, every step heavier with truth and lighter with freedom. Magda looked at her, pride and sadness tangled together. Healing begins now, she murmured. And maybe, for the first time, that didn't sound like a distant hope. It sounded like something real. Across the street, a group of women held signs that read, Believe her. Justice is survival. No more hiding. One of them handed Maya a single white flower. She took it, her fingers trembling, and whispered, For all the voices that never made it this far. As they walked away, the courthouse bell rang noon. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just steady, like a heartbeat resuming after too long in the dark. And somewhere between the sound of the bell and the fading chaos of reporters shouting her name, Maya closed her eyes and took her first real breath of peace. Mornings were different now, quiet, slow, almost awkward in their peace. Maya still woke before sunrise, the same way she had when fear used to live in her chest. But now, the silence wasn't a threat. It was a space. She'd started therapy. At first, she barely spoke. Just listened to the hum of the air conditioner, the pen tapping against the counselor's notebook. But week by week, the words came, heavy, uneven, sometimes trembling, but real. I'm learning to live without apology, she told her therapist one afternoon, without waiting for someone to tell me it's safe. Her counselor smiled. That's healing, she said. Not the kind that erases pain, the kind that gives it a home until it quiets down. In her apartment, Maya kept a journal now. The first pages were full of scribbles, anger, guilt, unfinished sentences. But the later ones began to look like beginnings. Notes for a talk she was planning to give, sketches of ideas for a support circle. If our voices built a case, she wrote, maybe they can build a bridge too. Across town, Chloe was setting up folding chairs in a small community center, the same one that used to hold self-defense classes and now hosted Rebuild Wednesdays, a workshop for women finding their way back to themselves. Danielle had come back to school. She was studying psychology. I used to think I was broken, she told the group during one session. Now I know I was just waiting for language. Magda and Priya had teamed up for something bigger, a series of workshops that trained volunteers on how to document abuse properly, how to keep timestamps, how to store messages safely, how to talk to survivors without judgment. We can't rewrite what happened, Magda said at the first session, but we can rewrite what happens next. The camera would move between them all, Maya's pen gliding across paper, Chloe hanging posters, Danielle laughing for the first time in months, Magda standing in front of a whiteboard, covered with flowcharts and hotline numbers, a mosaic of rebuilding. There was a moment that always stood out. The night Maya finally spoke publicly. The small auditorium was packed with women, some holding coffee cups, some holding their breath. She took the mic, voice shaking at first. "People ask if I feel better," she began. "Better isn't the word. I feel real. For years, I lived in a story he wrote for me. Now, I'm writing mine." Applause. But not the loud, celebratory kind. The kind that comes from people who understand exactly what it costs to speak. Later, Magda hugged her tightly. "You turned pain into architecture," she said, "something other women can walk through." At the back of the room, a slide glowed on the screen. "If you witness abuse, write down the date, the time, what you saw. Save messages, take photos, call the hotline. You are not powerless." And underneath, a small line. "Believe the voice. Speak to save." Over the next few months, the ripple spread. Chloe's group doubled. Priya's department added a new division dedicated to coercive control. Rosa, the nurse from the hospital, started a medical guide for ER staff on how to document hidden injuries. Healing didn't look perfect. Some nights still felt too quiet. Some mornings too heavy. But they had each other now. A network made from truth, empathy, and practical steps. One afternoon, Maya sat on her porch with her journal open. The last line she wrote before closing it said, "Forgiveness isn't saying it's fine. It's saying it won't define me anymore." The wind picked up, pages fluttering. She looked out at the street, a mother holding her child's hand, a young couple arguing softly, an old man feeding birds. Life, ordinary and unremarkable, which was exactly what she had fought for. Magda joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You remember what you said after the verdict?" she asked. Maya smiled faintly. "That healing begins now?" Magda nodded. "Looks like it finally did." They sat in silence for a while, the late afternoon light spilling across the table. In the distance, you could hear laughter from Chloe's center. A mix of voices, layered and strong, like a song that didn't need words. Healing wasn't a single act. It was a relay. One voice passing the strength to the next. And for the first time, Maya wasn't running from what happened. She was running toward what could be built from it. The sun rose slow that morning. Not dramatic, just quiet. The kind of light that doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. Maya stood by the window of the shelter, coffee in hand, watching it pour across the courtyard. A year had passed. A whole year since that verdict. Downstairs, the hum of voices began. Chairs scraping, soft laughter, someone testing a microphone. The first Voices Rebuild workshop was about to start. Magda sat in the front row, a small notebook on her lap, smiling that half-proud, half-protective way only mothers do. Maya took a breath, stepped up to the mic, and looked out at the crowd. Women, men, even teenagers. Some held notebooks, some just held themselves. She began softly. "When I testified, I thought justice would fix everything. But justice doesn't erase what happened. It gives us space to build something new. What we do with that space, that's up to us." A murmur moved through the room. People nodding, some wiping tears, others recording quietly on their phones. Maya continued. Justice isn't vengeance. Justice is a chance to rebuild lives, to believe people when it's hardest, to make sure the next voice doesn't have to scream before it's heard. Behind her, the projector screen lit up with slides, hotline numbers, local shelters, resources, checklists titled, "If you see something, do something." Write down the date and time. Save the messages. Take photos safely. Call the hotline. Check on your neighbor. Each point lingered for a moment, not as a rulebook, but as an invitation. Maya glanced toward Magda. "My mom once said something that stuck with me." She told the room, "If this ends at verdict, what about her nights?" So we decided it wouldn't end there. Chloe spoke next, sharing how her small support group had grown into a nonprofit. Rosa talked about the new medical guidelines she'd helped create for identifying signs of coercive harm. Danielle described returning to school, studying law, determined to defend survivors the way Magda once defended her daughter. Every voice built on the last, different stories, same heartbeat. When the session ended, people didn't rush out. They lingered, talking, exchanging contacts, hugging strangers who suddenly didn't feel like strangers. It wasn't closure. It was continuation. Outside, the morning light hit the shelter's front steps. Magda joined Maya there, the same way she had a year ago outside the courthouse. But this time, there were no cameras, no chaos. Just calm. "You were amazing," Magda said. Maya smiled. "I wasn't brave. I was tired of being quiet." Magda nodded. That's what courage usually sounds like. They watched as volunteers loaded boxes of pamphlets into cars, each labeled, "Believe the Voice, Speak to Save." Maya turned to her mother. "You think people will actually read them?" "They will," Magda said. "Because this isn't a story anymore. It's a map. And people always find their way to a map when they're lost." Later, as the sun climbed higher, the shelter emptied slowly. The voices faded, replaced by birds and city noise, the normal sounds of a world still spinning. Maya lingered a moment longer, her hand resting on the doorknob. "If you hear a voice," she said quietly, as if speaking to no one and everyone at once, "believe it. Share this story." Not for views, for voices.